Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sick Career Podcast. Today I have a fantastic guest, Richa Bansal. We are going to talk about how there's two different ways that you can handle your mindset on the job search and job acquisition. You can either take ownership of your career and take charge of that steering wheel, or you can play the victim card. And it's really ultimately up to you to choose how you want to interpret all the facts and data around you. She's also going to give you a really good tip on how to box the ask. I'm not going to tell you what that is, but that will help you get more relationships and more opportunities. So listen to podcasts for that one. And with that, we're going to start this episode. Before I do, though, let me just tell you how we can help you at Academic Careers. One, if you want some personalized coaching, direct access to me, a coach who will hold you accountable, support you all throughout the way, and be there until you get a better job, sign up for our personalized coaching program. If you're someone who prefers to do something more in a group environment and not necessarily have a direct coach or unlimited access to me, you may want to join our group coaching program. And they're both great opportunities. Check out our website, academicacareers.com. Both programs will get you a better job quickly, confidently, and with lots more money. The last three words I will leave you with are own your career. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sick Career Podcast. Today I am really excited to have Richa Bansal on the podcast. I met Richa on LinkedIn because she offers such great career advice of not being the victim, but rather owning your path and really taking control of your career. And I've just been very impressed with a lot of stuff that she posts on LinkedIn. I reached out, or maybe Richa reached out to me, and we wound up taking that relationship here to the podcast. So that's how you build relationships. But with that, I'd like to hand it over to Richa, who will give a little bit of a background on her and where she came from, some of the companies that she worked with, and what she's doing now.
Hey, Alan, I am so stoked to be speaking with you. As you said, LinkedIn is such a fabulous place to make relationships. I have gotten jobs from there, friendships from there, business relationships. I've had folks who have come and taught my program. I've met wonderful people just like you as well. So I am so excited to be speaking with you. And you summarize kind of like the work that I do in one sentence, that not be the victim, but be the owner of your career. And I'm sure we're going to talk a lot, dive deeper into how can you stop having that victim mindset and really start taking ownership of your career. So before that, a little bit about myself. My name is Richa Bansal. Whenever anybody asks, how do you pronounce your name? I say, I want to be really rich. Don't we all? Don't we all want to make a lot of money? At some point, I think we also need to talk about today, how can we stop the taboo of talking about salaries? And that's how we actually really land high and multi-six-figure offers. But I'm digressing. I come from India. I have over 12 years of experience working for some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. I spent majority of my career with Schlumberger, which is one of the largest oil and gas services companies. And then I worked for a year for Amazon as well. I've had a very, I want to say, non-linear career. I started off with wearing my hard hat, working on offshore oil rigs, often finding myself to be the only woman on oil rigs. I moved into engineering management. Then I moved to supply chain for a bit, back to engineering management, did manufacturing, then moved to corporate strategy. And at Amazon, I did recruiting programs. And now I'm a career and leadership coach. So very diverse, nonlinear career, but there has been a common thread that goes along throughout my story. And that one is that I have often found myself to be the only woman in the room throughout my career. I think that has been one of my strengths and not necessarily the weakness, being the only woman in the room. And as we go into discussing more, I'm happy to chat more about why being the minority gender, being the minority race, being the minority person is really your strength and not your weakness.
I really want to dig into this, Richa, because you've had arguably challenges in your career. You went to school in India, but you wanted to probably move to the States, and you were able to do that through Honeywell, it looks like, or Schlumberger. And you've owned your path. You've dealt with the obstacles that you had. So talk about some of the obstacles that you've dealt with. And I know you don't generally like to dwell on those too much. You more like to focus on what do I do with these obstacles, but just so that people have context of what challenges you dealt with throughout your career.
Yeah, I like to see all of these challenges, all of the obstacles that I've gone through, not as something that I regret or want to forget, but I really want to take strength out of all of these challenges, or like my story, right? And everybody has a story. So, a little bit more about my story. So, I went to IIT Delhi, which is one of the top engineering institutes in India. And the way it works in India is that you sit through this wide exam. Over millions of people sit for this exam, and depending on how well you do for the exam, you get a rank. And based on that, you get to choose what you want to study in college. So based on my rank, I was always, I saw myself as a very hands-on person since I was a little kid. And I wanted to do mechanical engineering. And I remember at the time, the professor who I was speaking with was helping kids decide what thing you should study. He told me, women don't take mechanical engineering. It's very hard. You have to lift heavy things. You have to do the foundry work. Women don't take mechanical engineering. Like, that's what I'm going to take. So that, I think, like, that challenging the status quo really started from there. And I did mechanical engineering, and I was the only woman in my class of 67 at the time. Until the second year, excuse me, another lady decided to join us. But that had been a running theme for the last 4 years. There was one girl in mechanical engineering throughout. And then I joined Schlumberger. It was a very 24/7 role. So I used to work on offshore oil rigs, fly by chopper in Malaysia. And one stint that has been very defining for me there as well was one time I had to go for a site survey, and it was like 300 miles into the ocean, one of the offshore rigs. And the weather was really bad at the time. So all the choppers were down. So they said, take a crew boat. Because a crew boat is this little boat which takes supplies to the big offshore rigs, about like 20, 24 people. And I remember I approached the crew boat. I was at the time the only person from Schlumberger, only engineer from Schlumberger, going for this 2 day site visit. And the main officer in charge looks me up and down and says, you know what? We've never had a woman on board. You better lock your doors in the night. And can you believe that I had to be on that crew boat for 48 damn hours? And this guy is telling me that you lock your doors in the night because we've never had women on board. It scared the shit out of me. Yes, it was very scary, but I could either at that point decide to not go or just back up and say, hey, I got to do a job. So I did. I was really scared. I did lock my doors. The weather was really rough. And I remember throwing up like at least 6 times in my little room that I was locked in until the safety officer took mercy on me. He's like, come out. He fed me an orange or whatnot. Then when I landed on the rig, they tell me, go back. We don't have room for women on the rigs. I would lie if I could tell you I didn't cry at the time, wasn't upset. But then again, I told him, hey, I am a damn good engineer. My company has sent me here to do my job. You find me a room on the rig. I am not going back to that crew boat. And they did. And I did a really good job. And I presented my findings to the client, and they were really happy. And when I went back to my office, I brushed my manager, but I did my job. So the moral of the story is never really saw myself being a woman. That is a disadvantage, really. I could see consistently that I had to sometimes try harder. Like sometimes, especially the type of roles that I did, people didn't necessarily welcome. They weren't used to seeing women doing roles like this. But then when I proved them that I am, if not equal, even, like sometimes even better than some of the other engineers they had seen, male colleagues they had seen, I would get compliments like, you work like a man. For them, it was a compliment. But for me, I was doing my job, right? You always see your work as an advantage. You always see yourself being a woman as an advantage, or yourself as a minority as an advantage, because people will underestimate you and then you can wow them.
So you've taken this mindset of, hey, people are putting up these obstacles. I'm going to overcome them. I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm not going to cower here. You locked your door. You puked in your cabin 6 times, and you dealt with this. What advice do you have for people that sometimes have maybe smaller hurdles than what I would argue being locked in your room with your own puke for 48 hours? And like sometimes people are like, oh, ageism's against me, or my gender is against me. And by the way, I'm a white dude. I'm 50, so maybe I'm old now. I don't know if I can say ageism works for me against me. But there's people that look at things and say the system's out to get me, and I'm going to cower and not take any action. And there's people like you that are like, hey, I'm going to prove them wrong, and I'm going to own my outcome. What advice do you have as you work with people on mindsets, how to take the same action happens, the same facts happen, How do people change how they interpret that, how they think, and then the actions that they take based on that?
Yeah. So first of all, I give them a piece of tough love. And I tell them that nobody's coming to save you. Nobody is really coming to save you. Your boss is not going to save you. Your company is not going to save you. Your parents cannot save you. Friends cannot save you. Even myself as a coach, I cannot really save you. You have to take actions to make things better and different for yourself. Okay. And then in terms of mindset, one thing that I really encourage everybody to do when they find themselves in this loop, finding themselves in this loop of misery and feeling stuck, feeling like they're just spinning their wheels in the mire and not getting out, is to really think back to how have they overcome obstacles in the past. Okay. Even if there are small obstacles, because we've all overcome even like little obstacles, and think back to when somebody was being a bully to you in school, or maybe you had some very poor grades and then you had to improve your performance from there. Maybe when you applied for your first job, and think through like how many different interviews that you had to go through to land your first job. And after 10 years of working for the same company, you tend to forget that. Think about the first time you were told no, and then how did you act? Like, how did you think differently? What did you do differently? You have come so far. Like many folks that I work with, they have like 5 to 10, like even more number of years of experience in their career. So they have this long inventory that they've gone of work that they've gone through, but often forgotten. Like, how did they overcome those hurdles? So just remembering that, just going back to like, I have done this in the past. Like, I have overcome obstacles in the past, so I can do that in the future too. It's not the end of the world. Like, I can figure it out. Just really brings perspective, I found, and helps people move forward.
Talk about how you were from India originally, correct? And then you work in the States. That's a path that a lot of Indians want to do, and it's not easy.
It is not. It is not. I have so much to talk about that.
You had to like literally be in a cabin for 48 hours with your own puke to make like that was part of your journey. A lot of people come to me and ask for help with visa situations, the OPT visa, the H-1B. It's very confusing for me. When I was a hiring manager at Google and Facebook, even those companies that hire so much talent screw it up because of the situation. So my general advice is don't worry about all the details. Try to get in there, but go through the interview process as long as possible. The recruiters will probably have it as confused as you. Don't objectively lie, but give yourself the benefit of the doubt. And if you get the job, they will figure stuff out. But before we go down that path, how did you do this path that so many people want to take? And it's a challenging one to actually make.
Yes, so it is a very confusing journey, and it is also a very hard one, especially for anybody who's listening to this and who's in the States. It's like even harder in the States than it is in some other countries. So I've lived and worked in 2 countries, and now in North America, majority of my career in US, and I also spent a few years in Canada. So when I first came to US, so remember I mentioned that when I started my career, I had come to US to study. So I was on the F1 visa, but when I did start my career, they moved me to Malaysia. So that's where I did my first couple of years. When I came back from Malaysia, my company actually did the L1 visa for me, which is when you work for a sister company overseas and you come to States, you can get an L1A or an L1B visa. And I actually came on an L1 visa. And something that I advise anybody and everybody who is listening now, I didn't know at the time, but L1B visa is like bonded labor. Okay. Because when you're H1, if you get laid off or if you want to move, at least you have 60 days to find another job. Some other company can do your sponsorship. When you are on L1, as soon as you lose your job, you are done with. You are tied to your company. You cannot work for any other company. You cannot find any other jobs. When you are laid off, you are just packing your bags and going back home. Okay. So I didn't know that at the time. Whoever is listening, please do not come on an L1 visa. Okay. I tried very late to do my H1. But anyway, so I came on an L1 visa and I did my several years on my L1B. At some point, I transferred over to an L1A visa. And throughout this time, I kept asking my company, hey, I want to stay in the States. That's where I went to school for. I want to raise my kids are both American citizens, and many immigrants, their kids are American citizens, and they are like struggling with this, especially if you are from the Indian origin, you're struggling for years, if not decades, waiting for your green card to come through. So I asked my company to do my green card, and they flat out refused. And they said, you have transferable skills, which really meant we can transfer you out anywhere. And so we're not going to do your green card. And at that point, I realized I can either be at the mercy of my company and they can move me anywhere and everywhere they want, or I can figure out how do I secure my own green card so that I can move wherever and whenever I want. If I don't want to move to the place where my company wants to send me, I don't move. So I only have a master's degree, and I did file my EB1 and my EB2 NIW, which is one of the visa categories. And then I filed my EB1A myself. So EB1A is that green card category, which is called the for the alien of extraordinary ability, which means that if you look at the criteria, it often says you have to have awards at the level of Nobel Prize and some very highly accomplished publications and so on. And oftentimes lawyers recommend if you don't have a PhD, you have no chance of getting through. And that's exactly what my lawyer told me as well. He said, you have 1% chance of getting through. And I said, I'm going to pay the money. You tell me what I need to do to strengthen my profile. I'll do the work. And that's what I did. And at the time, I was doing my MBA. I was a first time manager at work. I had my first kid, and I also worked for my green card because that was what was important to me. And I see so many people going back to that victim mindset where they're feeling that why am I in this place and why am I stuck in this queue? But when I tell them, why aren't you doing your EB1A? It's like, we just don't have time. And I tell them, if I could do my MBA and be a manager at work and have my first kid and do my green card application, you can do it too. So that being said, I did my EB1A. I got approved in EB1A. And at the time, unfortunately, even EB1A got backlogged for Indian nationals. So I did my backup and I filed for Canadian PR, Canadian permanent residency. So when COVID did hit and my husband did lose his job and my company did ask me to move back to India and take up this particular role, I could say no. So I could say no, like I want to be in North America. I am not going to move on your terms. And I moved to Canada. And we spent 3 years there. We just got our green card approved in a couple months ago. And we moved back in November back to Houston, where our friends are. We just closed on a house. And we also just wrote the application, not the application, but the test that you have to write for the Canadian citizenship. So hopefully, fingers crossed, in 3 weeks, we'll be Canadian citizens. And that's where we are. So what do we learn from this? People will say no. Okay. People will say no to you. But if you don't do anything, it's a no anyways. So you might as well try, right? It's back to you have to do things to really solidify your path, right? You have to do things to make them happen for how you want them to happen.
You're preaching to the choir, Richa. And I want to understand how you can help to change people's mindset, because it's a mindset that people choose to do. Like when you were told to go to Malaysia, you probably could have quit and done something else, but you chose to go there. You're like, hey, this is going to be the means to the end that I'm looking for. So how do you help to not convince, but to influence people to take a different mindset about these situations? Everybody's got good things. I'm sure you had lots of advantages of maybe like do you have a mom and a dad?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And do they love you and care for you?
I think that is just foundational and fundamental, right? I have also worked with clients where they have really tough childhood, but really I would come back to say that the way I was raised, I have a very strong mom. I was just like telling somebody the other day that when I was getting into first grade, my mom had purposefully chosen, and she said that I'm going to send my girl to a school where the primary language is English and not Hindi, which is our local language. Because she's like, I never want her to struggle with English the way I did. And my parents raised me the same way as they raised my brother. My brother is a surgeon, and they always believe that I can do whatever my brother can do. So I think that's just foundational. And I really hope and wish and pray that everybody has the same childhood, that, you know, that nurturing childhood that I did, and that I can instill the same sort of values in my kids. At least we can pass it forward. But that being said, how do you change mindset? I think one of the most foundational things that we have to do is to really get in tune with who we are as a person. And that's something that I really encourage everybody to do, all of my clients to do, whether they are looking to grow in their career, whether they're feeling stuck in their career, or whether they are looking for a new job, whether they are women, men, doesn't matter. Like anybody and everybody should start with really getting in touch with who they are, what are their core values, and what are some of the big results they've created and how. Okay, so I work all of my clients through this framework that I've created called the Power Framework, which kind of breaks down into what are our core values, what are our core, like what is our purpose here as an individual and as a leader, So what kind of change do we want to make in this world? I have some questions that I like take them through, which allow them to really get in touch with, okay, these are things that make me really happy and satisfied. This is how I want to make the world a little bit better than how I found it. This is the foundational change that I want to make in this world. And with that also comes the question, is your fear and is the fear of inaction, fear of perfectionism sometimes, is that bigger than the change that you want to make? Because if it's not, then you're going to prioritize making that change. And that change oftentimes starts with you. So then together with the values, the purpose, I help them go through all of the past accomplishments that they've had, small or big. And oftentimes I've found it's such a powerful exercise where people, when they reflect back to these are the little and big accomplishments we've had, they really start to see everything holistically. They tend to forget. So when you start putting this together, no, I've done this work as well. And I actually did this one too. And I actually, at this point, I fought with my manager and make this thing right. You start to put everything together and you get to realize how powerful you really are.
Are there certain industries that this works for better or stages, or can this work across industry and across like professional maturity?
It does work across industries, domains. It's really more like professional maturity. And I would say to that, when you're looking to get your first job, I want you to prioritize, and especially if you're an immigrant, prioritize a job that will give you that green card, have a path to green card. Prioritize a job that is in an industry that is growing and will get you the exposure that you need to be able to. So when you're first starting out, you prioritize industry, you prioritize like a fast growing sort of industry and role. But when you are starting to get that professional maturity, when you're 5 years in and you're still feeling stuck and not moving up to your first leadership role, or when you've had, let's say, a decade into your career and you're really starting to think about where do I want my career to be when I'm 50, right? I think that's where it's even more important to get in touch with who you are as a person, as a leader. Okay. So like back to a lot of people that I work with, a lot of women that I work with, they've had a decade plus years of experience. And many of them have children, and especially after they've had children. And I found myself there too. Like, after children, you find yourself that your identity has shifted. Is now you're a mom too, right? Or your parent too. And do you have kids, Alan?
I have three that I know of.
Yeah, and I'm curious, did you find that your identity had somehow shifted or there was something different? Or maybe what you wanted was different too?
It's interesting. I never felt like my identity changed, but my time and priorities definitely changed. I don't feel like I changed, but that's an interesting question. But I definitely had a job that worked less hours. American Express when my kids were younger, and even when I went to Google, my job, I was able to, for the most part, attend my kids' events and be there for them and coach and take time off as needed. So that was really important for me. But I don't think it changed my identity. I definitely showed a lot of pictures of my kids, and maybe it changed how people perceived me. But in my mind, I don't think it was changing my identity. But that's interesting how.
Yeah, and that is interesting. And I think that is one of the fundamental differences with women and our male colleagues, right? More and more women, they find their identity shift because they're also a mom. And like being a mom is part of their identity now with all of these other ways they identify themselves, right? And I've definitely found that more with my female clients than I did with some others. And definitely our priority shift. Our time is now spread between all of these things that are become much more important to me. I remember before I had kids, I was willing to pack my bags and move anywhere and everywhere I wanted. Like my company wanted us to do a stint in Russia. And I was like just so happy to be able to consider that. And so to really think about, I can do whatever I want whenever I want, but that's not necessarily the case now. Now I have to think about as I move, that has an impact on the friend circles for my kids. And it was a hard move anyways when we moved from Canada to US. But really, that being said, I think there is still a lot of shaming that happens, especially for women when they are expected to put their career below their family when they have families. And that is something that I found lots of women struggle with, like how do they manage treating their family and their career as equal? And there's this saying that is popular in media that women cannot have it all. And that's something that I completely disagree with. It's very popular. And I'm sure like lots of people here would say, what are you talking about? Yes, women cannot have it all. And I'm of the opinion women can have it all. You just have to define what having it all means for you. Don't go off social media or like LinkedIn. You see somebody else being a director, you're not necessarily seeing what's going on behind in her family life, what it looks like, whether she even has kids or whatnot. So you have to really define what having it all means to you and then get lots of help. When I talked about when I did my MBA and wrote my green card and the kid and the work, I had tons of help. I had my in-laws come stay with me for 3 months, and my parents, my in-laws, my parents, they helped us cook. We had a cook. We got lawn care. We paid for somebody to come do our laundry. If we can afford it, you pay for that and get lots and lots of help. At work, I did not struggle trying to find the answers myself. I go by this 15-minute rule. If you cannot find answers in 15 minutes, go find help. There's no prizes for doing it alone. So you can have it all with lots and lots of help.
Yeah, interesting. So I disagree. I don't think you can have it all, but I think you need to make priorities. And I think
Yeah.
everybody should own their priorities of what they're going to do. Because sometimes I did have to miss a work event, or sometimes I had to miss a kid event because sometimes they were just going up against each other and you have to make choices. But back to your perspective of owning your mindset and taking control, if you're choosing the priorities, you
Mhm.
can have all the things that you want.
Exactly. And that, yeah, it's really
You're
just a
not going to have
different,
it.
yeah, it's really a different perspective of what having it all really means.
And you also talked about how you got lots of help, and not everybody feels comfortable asking others for help, especially like with the job search. I deal with people all the time. I'm sure you do as well. I'm like, hey, you went to a good school, or you worked at this company. You can reach out, or you lived in this town. Reach out to people with that commonality, and people will generally be nice, and some people will be willing to give advice, offer help. It might be easier or harder. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable asking their parents for help. And it sounds like you definitely were not shy about asking for help when you needed it. Do you see that also with your clients, that some people are more comfortable asking for help versus others? How do you advise people to get a little bit more comfortable with asking for help?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that, and especially in the context of networking that you mentioned, right? Reaching out to people on LinkedIn, let's say for a cold informational chat, or even reaching out to your network to ask for, can you make me a referral? And I found more often it's less of a mindset issue and it's more of a strategy issue. Okay, and I'll say why it's a strategy issue. People haven't necessarily defined what help they want, so they struggle asking for what they want. I teach this concept of you have to box your ask. So, especially if you are reaching out to a warm network, like somebody, let's say a friend or past colleague for a referral, box your ask. And so, what that means is really define for yourself clearly in 2 lines. This is the type of role I want at this level in this industry. Okay. And these are my top skills and results. Okay. So these are like the 5 things: the level, the industry, whether it's a people manager role or individual contributor, the skills that you have, the results that you get. And when you very clearly define that box, that ask, it becomes much easier for you to make the ask, because then you are not being vague and the other person can actually think through. Okay, I just saw a people manager role open up in technical program management, which requires skills in finance literacy or whatnot, and this person would be a good fit for it. So you just make it easier for the other person to give you help, and they're more likely to help you. So when I found very often when my clients, when they box their ask, they become so much more comfortable in making that ask. Yeah.
I like that. You're doing the work, because as you're asking for a favor, you're asking for advice or support or referral or just insight. You can't ask people to do a lot of work for you.
Yeah, and it like goes everywhere, right? So from you asking somebody to advocate on your behalf. So if you want, for example, somebody to reach out to the hiring manager, don't just say, "Hey, can you connect me with the hiring manager, or can you refer me for that position?" Offer to provide a small paragraph. Hey, I've provided this little paragraph that talks clearly about some of my top skills and why I might be a good fit for this role. And write a small paragraph based on this boxing the ask technique that I just mentioned, and provide that, because then it'll just be so much easier for them to copy paste. They don't know your top skills, they don't know your top accomplishments. You just create that for them. Same thing, if you want somebody to ask for recommendation on LinkedIn, provide the draft. Okay, provide the draft and just tell them, hey, I would love a LinkedIn recommendation. I'm happy to provide the recommendation, LinkedIn recommendation for you as well. I had such a great time working together with you. I've actually provided this little draft for you for reference. Feel free to make changes to it if you would like, and let me know. I'm happy to return a favor.
That's great. And everything you're doing here is helping people help you.
Absolutely. You have to help people help you. When I did my EB1A applications, for example, I wrote down the recommendation letters. And then I again used the same technique. Hey, I'm writing these draft recommendation letters. Feel free to update them as you see fit. And nobody changed even a word, they were just sign. Nobody has time. People want to help you. You have to make it easy for them to help you.
That's such a great point. So, another thing that you talk about, and it might be more common with women, is talking positively about yourself and your accomplishments. Like when my mom says, tooting your own horn. Talk a little bit about that. And I think that is something that you do focus on. And how do you get people past those challenges? And what advice do you have for folks?
Yeah, and that's a real struggle for women, and more than that, for women of color. I can speak for myself and so many different clients that I work for, especially from India, where India and some of these other Eastern countries, where I've been taught that you just put your head down and you work hard. And hard work is what takes you far. You've seen our parents work really hard. We've seen our grandparents work really hard. And they want to instill this virtue, this moral of working hard, right? It's we've kind of like grown up with that, and school never helps otherwise. Like school also teaches us if you work hard, if you do what you're supposed to do, that's how you get good grades and that's how you get jobs, right? For decades, we've been trained that you work hard and not talk about your accomplishments, because talking about your accomplishments is salesy, is bragging, and it's not good. And so we have such a negative connotation to what talking about our accomplishments, self promotion, that is bragging, that it's bad, then don't do it. I've more than one instance, I've had a client tell me, and I'm going to go back to the white man. So excuse me, but more than one time I've been told, Rich, I just don't understand. Like my male white colleague just sit in the meeting and they were just like, I know they've done just this much work and they're talking about it. It's nobody's business. And I'm here struggling to find my words. And I think my English is a problem. Like your English is not the problem. It's just that nobody ever taught you how to strategically talk about your work, right? And so it really starts again back with mindset. I always start everything with mindset. So from a mindset perspective, one tip that I can share with folks who are listening is think about how you are doing your company a disservice, how you're doing your team a disservice if you're not talking about your accomplishments. Okay. Because if you're not talking about your accomplishments, you are not at the level that you should be. So the impact that you're making is still small. Think about if you're at the level of your manager, their scope is bigger, their impact is bigger. So if it troubles you to think about self promotion is self fulfilling and I don't want to do it for myself, think about how you're doing others a disservice, how it's like going against your values of actually creating that change. And with that change mindset and change perspective, then think about some of the strategies that can help you shamelessly and strategically self promote.
Yeah, it's critical. Getting a job, or what I call job acquisition, is selling and marketing and sales. And if you want someone to pay you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, you need to give them some reason to invest in you. You don't need to buy a $7 million Super Bowl ad, but you need to tell them about some of the impressive work that you've done in your past.
I hope that was one skill IIT had taught me was to market and sell myself. The ability to market and sell yourself will pay you 100x more than being good at your job or being good at a technical skill. Okay. So it's the skill to really market and sell yourself. And maybe I can share like two quick tips on how people can strategically sell themselves, one in job acquisition, right? Job search, and then one in the workplace. In the job acquisition or the job search space, it's really everything from resume to your LinkedIn profile to how you're telling storytelling is all about shouting at the rooftop and talking about what are some of the big results that you've created. So one of the tip is to really think about everything that we do having an impact to the bottom line or the top line of the company. Okay. So really think about it. Companies are not doing charity business. Okay. They are in the business of making money. They're in the business of making profit. So anybody they have on their team is supposed to add to either the bottom line, so they're cutting costs, increasing efficiencies, or they're adding to the top line, revenue increase. So connect everything that you do, take it all the way to how it's impacting the revenue or how it's impacting costs. Okay. So you decrease the SLA for a particular step. Think about how that decrease in SLA relates to how many hours saved, the cost of one person, and get to how much man hours you saved, and say, I made this process more efficient. That helps save $50,000 per year for the company. Okay. Or you take it to the top line and you again quantify it and say, you close this particular supplier 2 months ahead of time. That allowed the company to go to market 2 months ahead and increase your visibility by 10x. That helped create whatever dollar sales more. So stretch your mind to take every piece of impact that you've created, from intermediate results like improvement in process or lead time improvements or whatnot, to take it all the way to dollar figure. That really helps with mindset. One, for you to think about, oh, I've created real dollar impact. Okay. And then second, you can actually demonstrate that to the company that you're interviewing for. So that's tip number one. And the second tip that applies in the workplace, really leverage the status update meetings that you have with your manager. Most people talk about in their status update meetings, they say, oh, we've done the work, everything is going fine, everything is going well. So, and instead of giving these wake updates or just talking about what steps you've completed, talk about what that resulted to. So let's say you did a meeting with the sales team and you're part of the pricing team. Talk not just about, oh, I met with the sales team yesterday. Say, I met with the sales team that allowed them to revise their pricing structure. And we are actually now meeting with this new client. I'm looking forward to closing it. We were looking forward to closing it. So again, convert your work into impact. It's what I call like the impact conversion framework. Every piece of work you've done, convert that into impact.
It's always important, but now where people are getting laid off, you want to be able to know that your job that you're doing has some business. And if not, you may want to think about a career or a space where there is more alignment to top line or bottom line, or maybe if there's a nonprofit or something, like achieving some sort of goals, but making sure that you're aligned with the goals of the organization, especially in this tighter job market.
Absolutely. And even if you think that you made zero contributions at work, and oftentimes folks who are either stuck in toxic workplaces, they don't like their jobs, or maybe they got laid off in a few months in a role and they think, oh, but I only had a few months on the job, so I didn't really make a real impact. I still want them to think through, okay, had I completed this project, what would have been the impact? Because several times, even when we are not laid off, oftentimes, especially with large companies, you get to tend to be moved around, projects close all the time, right? Like always happen. Not always would you be able to see a project through all the way from the start to the end. And so it's really even more critical to train your mind to think through, okay, had I completed this project, had I gone to fruition, had it gone to commercialization, what would have been the impact that I would have created? And take it all the way there.
So you had a very successful career in the corporate world. You did an internship at Honeywell, you were at Schlumberger for a while, you were at Amazon, but now you're no longer working in the corporate space, right? Now you're working on Pink Careers. Is that correct?
Yes. That's my company, Pink Careers. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about how you made that transition and how that aligned with like your choices, your values at that time. Like what did you get out of the corporate career and what are you looking to do with your entrepreneurship, like in your coaching endeavors?
Yeah, Pink Careers started as very much not a business. I started Pink Careers back in 2019. And I remember in early 2019, just really going through my quarter life crisis. Hopefully that's quarter life crisis at 30 something. But I was really remember thinking through, like, how am I making an impact on this world? What change am I making? What tangible change and difference am I making? And granted, I was really happy. I was generally happy at work and I loved my employer. And indirectly, I am making an impact. I'm helping companies drill oil more efficiently so that it's better for the environment. And indirectly, I am making a change. But for me, just I fell through, I wanted to see that tangible, quick, like how am I making an impact, a direct line of sight. And I just didn't have that. 2019, I started Pink Careers. I just fell in love with this name. Suddenly came to my mind one night. I asked a friend, how do you think about this name for this company? She's like, I love it. And 11:30 in the night, I just registered for the domain. I started writing blog posts. 2019, really, Pink Careers started as a blog. I used to write about my journey, what I'm learning. Same thing, like you are the owner of your career. My very first post was about why being the only woman in the room is a good thing. So I've always felt that is my strength. And at the time, I remember just doing volunteering activities as part of Pink Careers at Texas A&M and other universities, University of Houston, just teaching students and other kids about how can they position themselves best in the job search process. So that kind of went on for a year and a half. It was nothing like serious, nothing that I thought about as business. And then when I moved to Canada, I had a real opportunity to think about Pink Careers as a business because I was not tied by the visa rules in the US. And I always wanted to support other women in advancing leadership roles as folks have been kind to me, some of my managers, my mentors. And so I started exploring how can we, through Pink Careers, work with companies and organizations to do women's leadership programs. And one thing led to another, and I got a contract opportunity with the government of Canada. And we ran our first 6 months leadership program with 10 women who work for the government of Canada. And then there's a huge sponsorship opportunity there, story there that I can share. But then one cohort turned into two, turned into five, into now we are running our two more cohorts. We have 10 cohorts. At this point, we work with 30 departments across the government of Canada. About 150 women would have taken our program. We were just listed by one of the departments as a partner, which they reported on their annual report. And then last year, I decided to quit my full-time position at Amazon because I wanted to expand my work further and support just women who are working for private companies through my one-on-one and group coaching programs as well. So now I do a lot of work helping women just really quit these career blockers and self-limiting beliefs so that they can really start to take control of their career and start commanding the compensation and career that they deserve.
That's an amazing story. And so you started it while you were at Amazon. You saw proof of concept. You started to get revenue. And so you de-risked.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of having a plan B. I couldn't have made the jump without having anything lined up. So in November 2022, when I made the jump, I was matching my salary from Amazon through the time I decided it was just time to go into it full time.
Yeah, I get people that come to me all the time of, oh, look at this all entrepreneurship thing you did. And I was like, it's fucking hard. And also I started it while I was at Salesforce. So I figured things out for a year and a half before I didn't match my comp. But at that time, it would have been nice.
I wish I was making $500,000 at the time, but no. But I did whatever small salary or decent salary that Amazon was paying me, I at least matched my comp, and it helped me feel more comfortable jump making the jump.
I probably did not. Yes, I should have played nicer in Salesforce and let that be there for another year or so. I was able to jump ship. But anyway, I digress. So these are so many great suggestions and advice about taking ownership and control and asking for help. We are running a little bit low on time, Richa. So I want to ask two last questions of you. One, and you've already given us a lot of great wisdom. What is one final piece of sick career advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
If I can leave your listeners with only one piece of advice, I would say be in the driver's seat of your career. Because if you are not in the driver's seat of your career, someone else will be. Your boss, your HR, even the economy. Like right now, the economy is in the driver's seat for a lot of people. So you got to be in the driver's seat of your career. That's the one piece of advice I would want to leave everyone with.
By the way, that is our acronym, Steer Your Career with Kadima. That's why it's called the Sick Career Podcast. Grab that steering wheel. And then finally, thank you so much for your time here. How can people find you, reach out to you, support you?
I am very active on LinkedIn. For anybody who's listening to this podcast, I would love to know you more on LinkedIn. You can find me by Richa Bansal. You type it up, I'm going to come up, and follow me. Give me a follow, send me a note. I would love to have a chat with you. And then one other resource that I would love to share with your followers, with your listeners is I created a little mini course on all of the things that we talked about today on how can you really own your career, how can you strategically learn to self-promote and position yourself for that next level opportunity. And people can go to pinkcareers.com/promotion, and they can access that free course there if they're looking for some more deep dive beyond our conversation.
Awesome. I read your LinkedIn posts every day. I have the bell rung on yours, and I always appreciate what you're saying there. So I will continue to listen and learn from you, Richa. So thank you so much. And with that, we shall end this podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast. And I really had a great time speaking with you. And I look forward to many more conversations.
Same here.